you have any questions? Let's start with this. We have 10 minutes. Any questions in kind of what comes to designer-developer flow? Like, or the other question, who works together with designers now?
It doesn't work.
It doesn't work. Why not? Why not?
Doesn't work, right?
Doesn't work.
It doesn't.
But why not? Do you get? I mean, the task is easy. You create a panel. It has some graphic elements inside. It's a kind of buttons and everything. Then they need to deliver it somehow, and you need to just cut it into small graphics. What's so difficult?
I think the most difficult thing is that they used to work visually.
Yeah.
While usually I just read the code. I just write the code. I don't use the designer in QtCreator, for example.
Me neither.
Because once you start adding some logic, some custom module,
yep.
basically you have to mock everything.
Yep.
And so it simply the QML designer simply doesn't work.
What get you delivered from a designer? Do you get a Photoshop file delivered, or do you get slid graphics delivered?
Yeah, usually just the graphics.
Just little graphics. They have some naming, and the name. My experience is the name tends to change. Seems to be the designer. Sometimes he wants to have an uppercase, sometimes lowercase.
Oh yeah, the naming is one of the.
And then the sizes are changing.
Yes.
Because you have drop shadows, you have some other shadows. The sizes need to change.
Yeah, but sometimes also the similar button is, for example, 47 pixels wide instead of 45 pixels. And do I have to take both of them or just one? Because sometimes it looks like the same.
Mm-hmm.
The user interface is the same, but why is one 47 pixel and the other 45? Does it matter?
No, it's a mistake, probably.
Yeah, it's a mistake. So,
yeah. But do you have a style guide? Do you have some kind of an extra document next to the panel which just says, this is a button, and this is how a button looks like?
No, we don't have one.
Yeah. I would recommend to just ask from the designer the style guide, that they give you something where they say, this is how a button looks like. This is a button in the press state, this is a button in the release state, this is enabled state, and so on. So kind of they need to get into the mode that they kind of decompose the graphic, because they just handle full service. They don't handle components. I mean, this is the way Photoshop works. Photoshop gives you a surface, it doesn't give you components, it gives you layers. But you need to kind of get them into the way that they give you components. Because this is how Qt works, QML works, this is how all the other frameworks work. They work on component base. So you need to get I want to have a style guide. Please give me, how do you want that the list works? How do you want that the button should look like? And then you can agree on them. That's at least what we're doing. We agree on them with which kind of naming convention you want to have for those things. Like button, underline, quest, underline, whatever, get yellow or something. There's something you need to come up with a naming convention. And then it should better help. But it also means, like when this comes to Nuno talk, you need to work with designers together. It's not a one-way communication. It's one-way communication means they design for management, like a vision, but they don't design for the product. And you, at the end of it, you get, someone slaps your hand that you deliver a product which looks bad. But they don't slap their hand design. They say, designer looks great in Photoshop, why can't you implement it? So this is something.
Or sometimes inflation, they design inflation, then you have to translate to QML.
Yeah, that's another, yeah. That's another bad part, yeah.
Don't worry, next talk is all about that. And I think your talk is about that. So these talks will complement each other really well.
So who else work with designers together? Yes, this gentleman.
I have to be honest, I don't have problems. We work very closely together. As you mentioned, we have established some workflows for how we want to get the pictures, which format do we want to get them. We have a design guide for our application, so the designer wrote it, and we both together wrote it. What is the component, what is the button, where to put pictures, and so on. So it works very well.
Yeah.
Okay.
So the key word here is really we work together, and we agree on a workflow. And that's really something. As soon as you can start communicating, you can read. Everyone should read the Agile Manifest. I mean, Scrum programming is great, Scrum courses are great, but read the Agile Manifest. It's about persons and communications over tools and processes. And this is really what's going on in the industry. You need to talk to people. You need
Test
to talk.
1, 2.
Especially nowadays where we get into the more animated user interfaces. There's no way to specify really nicely animations. Paper doesn't work there. You need to talk. And if you haven't done this inside your company, you need to change the way of working there to be able to deliver user experience. And this is what my talk is about. Kind of what kind of mechanisms really are delivered to deliver user experiences. What do we need there to get user experience up and running? Because personally I think like everyone is a good designer, as my previous talker said, Jens, when I remember right. Everyone is a good designer, and probably everyone is a good developer. It's just the question, how can they work together to achieve something more, something great? And they achieve passion. I have seen teams and great corporates where there are many designers inside, and they hate what they are doing. Because they know exactly, they never get to see what's really inside the target device.
You also take the point that the developer must also do the same. Because a famous mall must do the two jobs, yeah? I must imagine how the widgets have to be produced. Think about this when one person must do the two parts. Yeah?
No, my job is not like two persons need to do the same, the different parts, or one person needs to do the different parts. My vision is more like if you work like all programming language, if you work on one layer, you need to know how the layer above you work, and you need to know how the layer below you work. And this is something you need to have an understanding for this. QML is a quick language, gives you the understanding of vocabulary. It gives you understanding about colors, about forms, items, animations. You start already to speak the same language with the designers. And then it's something like you need to figure out how do they work? What's their workflow? How do they really come to an idea, from an idea to a really Photoshop file? Why do they create those layers which they create? What is a masked layer and so on? You need to have some understanding. You don't need to do their job, but you need to understand how they work. And they need to understand how you work, why you have technical limitation. Why can't you make a blend effect by a kind of full HD screen? Why it doesn't work on this little hardware? Then you need to figure out, okay, there's some shaders, OpenGL, pipeline. Okay, so we need to kind of stick to more normal things. And this only gets us when you have a conversation up and running. Yep, I'm finished.
That's a good time.
Hey.
So there's still a couple of minutes, but then we will start.
2 minutes after my clock.
Yeah, a couple of minutes, yes.
Couple.
Yeah.
I think we can start.
Okay.
Yay. So yeah, my name is Jürgen Bocklage-Ryannel. A little bit where I come from. In 2000, I started in a small company. It's called Digia. We started to do the first smartphone with Digia before Nokia, the 7650. I am C++ developer, deeply embedded in C++. So I worked on mobile phone platforms for a long time. Then moved on to Siemens as a software architect for mobile phone platforms. And then started to work for Trolltech as a consultant, and later as a trainer, and then as a training manager. And then we were bought by Nokia. And then I started at Nokia, I started to get the first hand on QML. And this was kind of brain changing. Kind of, you had to really reset your brain. As C++ developer, you're so used to do everything procedural, objects. And in QML, you have to have a complete different thinking. You need to approach something not from the functional level, you need to approach something from the visual level. And this also you need to approach things not from features, you need to approach it like how does it look, what the designer really wants, how it should feel. And this is something completely different. What I did I looked at many user interfaces, and I just tried to copy small snippets and tried to implement it in QML, just to figure out what's the mechanics behind, what works. After Nokia, I got part of Pelagico. It's a company which we are working in the automotive field. We're making user interface for large automotive companies. And I'm just doing QML. I try to avoid C++. I have to do sometimes C++. It's okay. And many of my companies, they hate me for this, that I try to just do everything just in QML and maybe even with WebSockets and Node.js servers and Django web services and so on. And I try to avoid the C++ thing. It's not because I hate the C++ thing. It's just more like I want to push QML forward. I think it's a very fascinating technology and allows me to do something which I haven't never done before. Thinking about forms and functions and colors and how something appears. Working with designers on very early in the project. Normally when developers come into the project, it's much later, after user interface specification have done, graphics have been done. Then you come into the project to do the final work, to make really the product. No, we are much earlier in the product. We are really early when they think about the visions, and when they think about the first user interface elements. We are already inside the companies, and we work with them on these visions which are created years after. That's so exciting. Yeah, cool. I'm really. So this is our company. We're based in Munich and in Gothenburg. So my agenda is very simple. It's about prototyping with QML, and prototyping with QML demo. So what's prototyping in the first place? It allows really a user to evaluate a design proposal. So very early hands-on. It's not about the user interface specification. It's not about the graphics which are delivered. It's about to deliver something running, something where someone can click on something and see what's the response. You need to think about there's a user interface specification writer. He has this large Word document. And he needs to have a mental model about how the house software should work. And we work on systems. It's not on one application. We work on house systems. And this is really difficult for them to understand really how is the information flow, what's user interaction really possible. And so we help them, we aid them by providing a kind of wireframing UI early on, so that they can get already an idea how things are working. They can click on something. They can see, when I click here, I go there. When I click there, I come back. This really helps them to understand, okay, these decisions which I'm doing, is that right? So it's feedback based on tryout and cast of just descriptions. At also some points it's kind of like a learning curve for our customers often. They start with a really heavy specification, then they start to have a little bit less specification, and then they figure out, okay, actually the prototype is a specification. There's not much more needed there really. And then suddenly it gets more lightweight and lightweight for them. They have to have less work, and they can really concentrate what they're used to, or should do, concentrate on the user instead of the Word document. And that's something which is suddenly that frees them up. That's why I met also quite a lot of frustrated user interface specification people, because they have to write really heavy specifications, really heavy work, research, how are the system working, which function calls need to be done when you do this, and so on. I've seen large charts and activity charts and state charts and everything. And at the end, they figure out at some point, okay, we all don't need it really. The only thing what we need is communicate, discuss things with someone else. And this is something really, it releases them. Then, finally I can concentrate on the user. So we're not doing only prototyping, and that's the trick with QML. You're doing an evolutionary prototype. Your prototype over the time becomes a product. So we start working on a prototype early on, wireframing, adding graphics and so on. But then at some point we refine the prototype more and more by developers which know how QML really works. And then the prototype suddenly starts to become the product. So the prototype is not thrown away. It's over time, used, reused, changed, and becomes a product. This is what we actively implant in all those companies. Looking on user experience. So what is user experience in the first place? This is a table from the elements of user experience from James Garrett, Jesse James Garrett. When you look on the lowest layer, you will see their strategy. Strategy is something defined by a board, something business value, management. They say, I want to have a product, runs in this market, should cost in this range, should have these roughly marketing features. Then there comes the next layer. It's a scope, the requirements list. Like which features should it have? Should support Bluetooth 3.0, LE, this Bluetooth profile, and so on. This is what they have. Then comes the next layer. It's a structure. How many applications do we need? We need to have a media application, maybe a radio application, maybe some kind of car to play or some other applications. So they figure out this is the structure. And how can you navigate between those applications? So this is navigation. How can you navigate inside a system? If you have work on one application, you also think about how to navigate between the pages of your applications or between the different elements. The next layer is really the skeleton. Skeleton is about really the layout. Where do I put something? Where should be a button be? What should be inside the list? Which kind of doc? Should I have a list or a table? This is your skeleton. And then comes the surface. The surface is the thing what we really see. Surface are images and text, graphics, really heavily graphics dependent, at least in our industry. This is what you really see at the end. You see the structure, you kind of inherit from the structure. The problem with QML is really that if you add a lot of graphics on top, you don't see the structure. It's gone. It's just, you see just graphics. You don't know really how big your list is below. You don't really see how big a delegate is inside the list or how big really the button is, because you could have a graphic which is much bigger because it has some shadows. We have a solution for this. So this is a typical flow in wireframing, and I match them to the layers from James Garnett. So wireframing is a typical thing. Wireframing is about black and white graphics, thinking about the user information architecture, thinking about what you want to offer to a user on a specific certain moment, which input possibilities he has, which information he should receive. These are kind of those black and white diagrams. I'll show you an example later on. Then comes the graphics. This is typical with Photoshop designer, the designer which does graphics. But it does not only do graphics, he also does layout. He does the typing, font information, which font to be used, and more information. Then comes motion. Motion is a new field. And this really breaks the neck for a lot of industries because they don't know how to handle motion, how to specify motion. It's really difficult for them. And this is something we personally believe needs to be done because motion is really emotional. You see an animation, something slides open or closes, and you can apply different easing curves on this, different ways of animating. But only a few animation really gives you the feeling that this is natural, this is something, well, yeah, this is exciting. Other ones are just, okay, I have an animation, I know animation, eye tracking, my eyes go there, but it doesn't feel like, oh yeah, this is cool. This doesn't have the event. So this is something you need to play around with. You need to get fast loopback curves, runtimes. So how do we work then with those different wireframes? Because you need to think about there are some different groups involved onto the customer side. There's a user interface group, which writes user interface specification. There's the designers, which come afterwards. After partly or fully the user interface specification has been developed, they go to graphics, Photoshop development. And afterwards, everything is ready, they go to motion. And how can we support them in different cases? Actually, what we do, we actually follow their path. So think about it. So you have one stack which is motion, one is about graphics. You should not go. It gets better. And so one thing is wireframes. And what we do is actually we follow them. We follow them like they have designed something in wireframing. So we make a simulation for this. Then they add some graphics. We add those graphics on top. So it's kind of like we have a kind of like in Scrum style, we have like a 2-week sprint. And every 2 weeks, the designers and user interface designers, writers, they get a simulation from us. They see what we have done, how much information we got from them, and how much can we already fulfill their requirements. And based on this, they can act and react. And then at some point, we got to motions, so we start to work with them on animations. And then the only thing is we need to do, we need to plug in the real backend. You hear the term often from us. I speak about front end and back end. Front end is the user interface part, the QML part. The back end for me is really the C++ part, the native part, where we get the data from. So this is roughly how the workflow works. So you have interaction designers, you have graphic designers. They give you the input, the specifications. We develop them inside of our team. It's important that it's a developer team because you want to have evolutionary prototyping. You want to be a product at the end. You don't want to have some kind of stupid code running around. You want to have something which really makes sense, also in a larger base. And then what we do, which takes the same UI, use the QML plugin mechanism, and plug it in against a native interface or native backend, or use it against our mock interface, so that we can ship it with the mock interface to the simulation, to the people, and then they work on this. Because early in the project, you need to also think about embedded project at least, you don't have a real backend. You don't have it yet. People are working. They start at the same time working on the UI and starting working on implementing the services. So you need to kind of mock those services early on, so that you can deliver the simulation to them. At some point, you are able to switch between them. And then comes a big crash because they are not used. That people get loaded and reloaded, and then, but over the time, they get more stable, and then you can throw away your mock interface. So normally for us, like 30% inside a project, we use our mocked interface, and afterwards we switch to the native interface. But these 30% gives the user interface team a big, big leap forward working on a real product. So how does it work with QML? This is a layer where we talked about. I see the user interface specification just as a layer above the UI. So this is for me, this is just another layer. They give me raw information, visual information, and I just take it in. When I work as a front-end developer, I work together with them. They're just the next layer. Below me are the back-end people, which do the back-end services, C++ services, native services. And then below them is the OS. This is like, I need to know what the back-end is doing, I need to know what the user interface specification is doing. And everyone needs to read the requirements, because there are all kind of strange requirements inside which you need to fulfill. And then on the other hand, everyone needs to do acceptance tests, like unit testing, testing their layer information. We use BDT testing. I think there's a talk from FogLogic about this. So we write user stories, and then based on the user stories, we write our acceptance tests. And this really works nicely, wonderful. Coming up to a typical QML system, it's really simplified. So you have a front-end part with kind of the system UI, and then you have all the application views and the controls. This is your widgets. The system UI is something you think about, a system which have many applications, and you remove all applications. And what is less is your system UI. So this is kind of the mechanism how to launch an application. It's your status bar, maybe in the card, maybe your climate bar, which you can swipe in and so on. And the application views are those kind of a bundle of visual views or pages which make up an application. And the controls is a reusable widget library which you create to fire up all those different applications to fill this user interface. Then you have an API. The API is your QML plugin API which goes below and goes into the native system. So in our prototyping environment, we have a user interface, we have some mock controls, we have really simplified controls at the beginning. It's really, a button is a rectangle with a mouse area, maybe a text element inside. So there's nothing more. That's completely enough to get started, to get people the idea. You can have a property text, property clicked, or signal clicked. That's enough to get started completely. And then we have an API. We also simulate it in QML, which gives us the simulated QML backend. So we can start. Completely independent from the backend team, we can start. That's important. Don't wait. I hate to wait. So don't wait. So practical consideration for prototyping is you need to have fast round trip time. You need to be really fast. You need to go down, 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 down. You need to have a simplified user interface, at least to start with, before you go into the production user interface. Just to get the idea, get the sketch. The same you see later on the wireframing tool. They do the same. You need the easy export of assets. You saw already the video, or some people which were waiting in the break. You saw already the video, one of those tools we are using. You need to have easy access to data. Data is very important. I mean, what we did sometimes, we started because we didn't have data, we started to add the data inside the QML code, which was like really bad, like inside the user interface code, because then you had to rip it out afterwards. So we really moved it into another import layer where we import the backend. You need to verify your performance on the hardware, very important. You need to be early on the hardware. It doesn't have to be exactly the same hardware, but it should be kind of a similar hardware to see how graphics, animations really work there. And you need to have a system which is open to evolve, because it's about evolutionary prototyping. You need to be ready to redo work, refactor. So this is tools that we are typically using. Balsamic, a wireframing tool. You can also use other tools, Azure, there's something or other. Azure, what's the other name? Then we use PNG Express for Photoshop exports. I personally use Sketch because I'm not a designer, but I'm pretty good with Sketch already. Qt Creator, our IDE. And there's QML Live, that's our out tool, which we have open sourced last night at 1 o'clock in the night. And I personally use JSON for data. So I have a web server which provides me all the data, which I can then plug in my QML backend providers and then deliver it to the surface. to the front end. And we use many QML techniques. So I'll show you how and I'll show you what. So this is our little application we want to create. This is kind of based on the talk from Jens Bacher-Wiek, prototyping UI. So on the left side you see the wireframe, on the right side you see the result with the data inside. And we do the same what they do in normal design. We do first the wireframing, so mocking a wireframe UI. Then we add the graphics and polishing the thing. And then we connect it to the real data. Luckily, I'm prepared. Yeah, this is the QML Live tool, and the font is really small. But we don't need this one, so this one. So this is a QML Live tool. What it does, it's a very simple tool. And it watches over a folder and the subfolders. As soon as the file changes, it detects it as change and reloads the file which you have selected inside this one currently. So very simple. So you start typing in Qt Creator, save, change, save, change, all the time. And you don't have to work on the QML file which you are viewing. You can work on completely different QML file, and you see that's the change because we detect is there any change inside your subsystem workspace. So let's try it out. Is it the right one? I don't know. Yeah. So this is our QML file, main QML. And the font is too small. So, yeah, let's make a rectangle inside. So you see, I don't save yet because I know there's nothing to see yet. So it's kind of you have a mental kind of idea what you're doing, and when you save, you kind of verify does it really work. And this is kind of really good teaching for you because they really teach you all the time. Okay, now I have a piece of code done. See. I have a piece of code done, C. I know that I now almost have something which I can show. So, it's a red color. Everyone what's expected. So we have another item. I import utils. Utils is, let's go to Sublime. Utils is actually one of my reusable components. This is a very simple element which just has some kind of little bit opacity. It can have a text in the middle and a little bit border. And this I use for wireframing. And there's another thing like the style, which I use to kind of centrally collect all the style information, like which font I'm using, which font sizes are available, like font XL, font L, font S. And I have a function for loading icons because there's a problem in QML that some problems are relative, like how do I load the next QML element, but some problems are absolute. Where's my root of my project? So you need to have a fixed address and go from there. This is what this icon function does, actually. And I have a tracer. A tracer I show a little bit later. Tracer is something to unveil the surface, the structure below the surface. So I use my marker here. And I should see this. So this is now this marker. So the nice thing about the marker is I can stack markers. They just get a little bit bluer, a little bit darker. So you can see the depth of the user interface you create. And then you can add the text there, which creates a little text on the top, or you can have also a center text. Almost. Center text. So this is now text centered. So it's just a very simple element. You can click on this element, you get a signal, and you can do some other things. So very simple. No, I just need to. Just a moment. Qt UI talk structure. So this is a wireframing tool we used earlier. This is Balsamiq. And Balsamiq lets you just concentrate on the structure of your UI. You can't do coloring. You can't make something blue or red. I mean, you could, but it's not. You don't do. Because as soon as you make something blue or red, someone will argue about why is it red, why is it blue. So it's not there. It's about structure. It's not about structure and content. Not about colors and it does look good or bad. So this is our little structure, and this is something we want to kind of now do with our kind of markers. Because I'm a developer, I know that in the behind I need to have a list view. And as a model, there's a shortcut. I can just say 10. So I have 10 elements in my model. And the delegate is just a marker. Just say this is, or the center text I want to use. Image, hash. It's just convention I use. Index. Oh, sorry, I need to see this one. I'll stay on top. So you can see you don't see anything. Why? Because it doesn't have any size. Now it has a size. You see you have like 10 elements inside. So you see also it's a little bit big, so we make it a little bit smaller. I don't know, 96, whatever. Width should be view.width. But I need to get the view. And now, so now we have at least a list of images. Think about it, list of images. They're not really images, but it's from the structure it works. Now we need to have a toolbar. So we make another marker. We give an ID. Toolbar. Toolbar should kind of take this kind of search icon here. Or search text field. So it's a marker. It's completely wrong place now, but we can have a shortcut for these anchors. Anchors left, top, parent top, bottom, parent bottom. So height, maybe another 96, whatever. So now there's a toolbar. We know the list view is not really right. So we need to anchors bottom. Let me remove this whole thing. Left, top, parent top, bottom. Toolbar. So now it's kind of nice. Oh, you see, it paints below the toolbar. So you need to, as usual, you need to do clipping. Yeah, now it's away. So we know that this is a toolbar. We give it a text. This is our toolbar. So we know this is now our toolbar. I hope some people can read it, but this is how it looks like. That's a nice thing, because you have difficulties to read it. I can just go in, and I need to see if I have, again, the right one. And I can just, this is now, I'm inside the marker. And I have a text label here, pixel size 10. This is really small. Make it 14. And make this one, I don't know, 28. So it's easier to read. So it's much better already. So it's just kind of like, you see, I just jump around in the code, jump around between the components. He figures out, the QML Live tool figures out something has changed and reloads the thing. We had some discussion about we need to preserve state. Kind of like if I have image 4 selected somehow and I make a code change and then we want to preserve state. So image 4 is again selected. First of all, this is utterly complicated. Second of all, it leads to bad code. It's because we want to have components, reusable, lightweight components. I want to be able to look at every QML file inside the project and see that this gives me something pleasant and useful user interface. So this is my target. So I want to be able to I don't want to concentrate on the whole application, on the whole system. I just want to concentrate on the one component and kind of sculpture this. This one component I want to sculpture. I don't want to sculpture the whole system. I want to get the component out of context, in my own context, and work on this. That's important. Otherwise, a project gets really complicated. For us, a project always stays simple because we focus on one component at a time. So I could continue with this, but I think you get the idea. So I just load the final project, and I just run it. So this is then the final project, how it looks at the end. I have done a stack view inside. So if I click on this, so I have a click signal, I have a stack view which opens another page and goes back. So I have here another thing I can use back. Search doesn't really work because I have nothing to enter text. It is not the idea about a mockup or wireframe. Just give me a placeholder. So this is information you can get. So this you can go to the customer and ask him, so how about, is it something you envision somehow that you have something to navigate back and forth? Say, oh yeah, but I would like to have this button there that we can close the application. So now this is just a little effort for you to add a marker and write close on this. If you would have done all the graphics, all the polishing already, this would be a lot of effort. The designer has to go back and change the Photoshop file, get all the pixels alignment right, maybe he gets the wrong pixel alignment, then you need to kind of check this again. So this is also called a low fidelity prototype. So it's easy, it's cheap, you can change it often. Speed, rapid speed. That's about it. Keeping the pace. So, according to our slides, we should come to part 2, the surface, adding graphics and polishing. I mean, we had a little bit of discussion about designers. And this needs to go to the back. So designers, they mostly work in Photoshop. Nuno as an exception. And this was an example we had from 2011, I think, 2010, 2011. It's a kind of graphics, and the idea was, can we get this in QML? So we kind of Qt, or the Trolltech at the time, had this kind of Photoshop plugin, which all the different details, and something worked, something didn't work. And I always felt like, okay, this is a nice thing, but not really something useful. The value is kind of educating your designers to prepare the Photoshop file ready to be exported, to follow a naming scheme which you agree on. We have tools which even verify the problem that you had, that the developers and designers agree on the names of the icons or graphics. We place them into a file, and then every time they deliver something, we say, this is missing, this is missing, this is missing. So if a tool will automatically verify the delivery of the designers. Say, no, 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 yes, this is too big. We agreed on 220 times 460 sizes. You have to deliver too high, and so on. So we kind of try to get them into a scheme of working. Not that every time we get a delivery from a designer, it's completely messes up our user interface. Because it's really difficult to find those things. So this is a background. So I tagged already those places. Again, a little bit low to read. But the idea is just like from the PNG Express, at least, I can't go back from microphone, that you have a PNG double colon, and then you have a tag name. You have other possibilities with the other tools also. I think Photoshop 6 has this auto-export function, which can also tag names and labels. But this is something you should agree on one of those systems inside your project and follow them, and kind of leverage their system, how they work, those exporters. So what's nice about this tool is, I need to find it again. So I can export the assets, and I can specify templates. If I want an HTML mockup, JSON data mockup, or QML mockup. I just made a very simple QML mockup. I wanted to make some more sophisticated, but I really didn't have the time for this. And the template is based on this exporter plugin, extracts meta information from all these layers into one's export, and then provides a way to kind of inject this inside your template system so that you can create something else. I will show you the template. So yeah, I want to have all four. So I just export them in one resolution. So this is kind of a designer. When a designer does 2 times exporting, it gives the same results. This is already incredible for designers. This is kind of unbelievable. I know many designers which export 2 times the same image. They have different sizes. It's very simple to do. So, structure, surface. Pardon? So this is our export. So these are the graphics we exported from there. And there's HTML file there. So you can see, you can go through and you see the different buttons, and you should, if I would have a network connection, I should also see, you will also see normally the size of the graphics, how they are.
What is this? What is this tool again?
PNG Express. I mean, there are more tools, but you need to standardize less than one. Yeah. So, and besides this, I also have, I need to go here, a QML file. There's no, let me see, surface, PNG for the web. Yeah, this is kind of the QML file I generated. It has the different images with the XY coordinates, the width and height, and the name. Normally, I envision something you generate from a Photoshop file, you generate a mock-up. And it gives like an inventory. It tells you, this is a list of images you just received, this is the sizes, and last time you received these images, and you deviate these and these amount of this. And here you can kind of combine them all together into one. And here you can make an explosion, kind of how everything looks when it's exploded. And this is kind of your inventory. So just have something like a little bit those graphics better under control. It's very important. In large systems, you have many, many graphics, thousands of graphics. You need to get them under control. We are not there yet. We are working. Not really hard, but we are working. You can have JSON export if you are into JSON, so you can read the JSON files and see what's going on. Yes, and actually the template is not really difficult. So this is a template I use to generate the QML file. So it just says like a very kind of, if you have Django styles, or I'm not sure, then you have document with the assets. Assets means like you iterate for each asset inside the assets. One asset is one graphics. 50 minutes. Nice. And version. I need to hurry up. Okay. So if I run it, you will see the same user interface, so it's not really interesting. The other tool I'm using is Sketch. If you use a Mac, you're lucky. If not, then sorry. But this is really great. Think about this little graphics. So this is a toolbar, the graphic for the toolbar. And what it has several fills or several shadows. It can have several fills. It can have several borders around. So you can have one rectangle, and you can add like different fills, different shadows, outside things, and so on. So you don't have to make those really complex. And it's really easy to use. So you can just make a rectangle. There's a shortcut for this rectangle. I make a fill, something like some gray. Then I add another fill. Yeah, now I have already a gradient on top. So they are fills I overlaying. And they're kind of, this tool is kind of a mixture between Illustrator and Photoshop. It's vector art because I can resize it as I want. And finally, I can also get radiuses. I can round corners, which are resizable nicely. I can make, if I want to make something like 180 pixels of the width, and someone just tells me, but I want to have 64 pixels more, I can just make plus. And so on. It's really great when it comes to exporting files. I just need to text this, say make export tool, and then I can just export it. And I would export it into my desktop. That's all it's there. It costs like $70, $80 or euros, whatever. So it's not the world, but people are really, I really love this tool. Because it allows me, because I don't really like Photoshop, because Photoshop is made for doing photo manipulation, not for writing user interfaces. And nowadays, it was okay when you had like one user interface size. But now it gets like, you work in a world where you have many displays. We heard it this morning. Many displays, many different screen resolutions. You need to have vector art to get the different display resolutions clear. Illustrator is a possibility. Illustrator, Inkscape is also a possibility. But you need to have vector art. You need to go to vector art over. And this is kind of a mixture between Photoshop and vector art. You have blending modes, screen blending modes, and so on. And it has really nice tools. I need to hurry up. Yes. So the idea is then really, let's open the right project. And you know the idea, let's make it small. If you work with QML Live Bench, you need to add the import path, because I'm using quite a lot of import paths. So we need to add the right import path for the new project. Import. This is something we need to work on. So this was the old thing, and now the idea would be now that I add the toolbars there, the graphics and so on. But I skip it also. We go directly to the final solution because I have only 10 minutes, I guess. So again, I need to change the import path or the solution. Let's open this directly. Yeah. Remove this. 3 imports. So now I'm just don't think about the model imports. I tell you later. So now we have the full graphics ready. So and it still works. So what we can do is we can just kind of remove this, and okay, it's not really much to see. Right folder. But if I inside the list item, so if I remove something, I see things are changing. So it still works the same. The good thing is I have an object list page and an object viewer page. I can see both. Object viewer page currently doesn't give me a lot because it needs content. It needs to have something to object to view. In this case, it's music data. So object list page gives me already the real data. So this is just a question. What we use the concept of sheets. We wrap this page into another QML element where we initially just set the data and then just instantiate this object view page here inside. And this is kind of like, this sheet concept is for us really important because this is like, we talked about the style guide. So you can receive a style guide and you can receive a button which says button normal, pressed, highlighted. And what you want to do, you want to create a sheet where you have all those 3 buttons, maybe with long text, short text, with an icon, without an icon, with all these different variations on there, maybe as a grid or as a table, and then show it to the designer. Tell them, okay, you asked for this button in this kind of way, and here it is. So we use this sheet concept just to kind of go into their world. We get a style guide from you with a button with all the different states, and here's a style guide from us. This is how this works in the real world. So we do the extra effort to make it easy for them. But it helps are really good for coding because we actually make the sheet, run it in QML Live, and then we can just work on the button. So we see how a button looks with long text, with a button works with short text, button works without an icon, and we can just kind of sketch these things. So this works really nice. Coming back to the tracer, you don't see the sizes here. How big is an image? How big is a list item really? You can guess from the graphics, but you don't really see it. I have so many things on. So we have a debug flag in our style which we can just switch on. And then suddenly we see all the different graphics. So what it does actually is the tracer is something which says, when you place me as a child of an element, I get as big as the parent element, and I don't paint anything besides a small red border. So you see the outline of the element below you. You see the structure below the graphics. That's very important. So tracer is really something, if you work with complex interface, it's really important. And I need to hurry up even more. And backend API. Yeah, that's okay. So what we have, it's also open source now. Yesterday, 1:30. Probably. It's this data provider. It's actually what it is. It's a Django database. I need to run the server. Yeah. So I have Safari open. So it gives you already these different URLs which are available. I go on music, I see the data back from the music file. So this data provider has a command to scan for movies, scan for music. It looks in your home folder for a media folder and looks into there and scans all the MP3 files, extracts the metadata, puts them in the database. The same for movies, for trailers. This is the same we are using on our Neptune UI. And we have a context database where we have like 3,000 contexts there, simulated contexts. So we can, if we need to mock a user interface, we can just say, here's the server, here's the data, we can make queries on this, and here's it gone. And you don't have, because data is so complicated to get. Cover art is so complicated to get. This is, and every time you do it again. So I need to probably get the solution up and running. So this is now the final UI. We just added it into the data. This is actually done using Sublime. So we have, I would like to get this bigger. This one, I need to close this one. So this is our structure we are using. So we have an imports folder. You need to look here on the left side. We have an imports folder, which we have all controls inside. So utils and controls normally. Things getting more complicated with the time being, but for this simple example, it's okay. So we have the different components we are working on. And here we have something like a JSON part, JSON list model. This is from Romain, one of your colleagues. JSON list model, which kind of fetches the data from the network. So you give it a URL. Then you make a query on the data, and you get everything back as a JSON list. There's a marker inside. And then we have a model import, because I don't want to have my backend inside my QML code. So this is my music core. This is my music function. So it's nothing else than a JSON list model. The sources to my local host, because I know where to fetch it from. I have a search query, so I can add some search for a specific interpret. I can query on the results and have some resolve URL function to resolve the cover art, because the cover art has specific meaning. And then if I plug it into my my UI, I get actually this. So this is really actually coming from my server. So I just can say, I'm looking for Coldplay, and I get my Coldplay data. I click on this, I get the cover art there, and back and forth. The same works with movies. It's actually almost the same code. You just need to make a movie model, and then make a different query, and then you plug it in. So this is really easy. And if you want, this whole thing has also an administration area. Some of the next things I would like to work on is like for radio stations. Like this is, for example, for movies. I can go inside, I can edit the data. It's automatically generated by Django. This is why I like this tool. Also, many people prefer Node.js nowadays, but I like Django because it generates automatically this admin interface. 5 minutes probably. And so next thing I want to do is like radio stations. I can add radio stations for MP3 streams, so to simulate what the tuner is, seeking for new radio stations and so on. That's kind of the idea where I'm walking along. Coming back to my presentation. A lot of content, sorry. Conclusion. Work close with designers. Take them. They're not your enemies. You should be your friends. You should be a partner. We make mixed teams. I mean, there's some designers which have worked more on the vision. They're more on the concept UI. But some designers, they really work together with the project. They really care about how a product looks at the end. They don't care about what the manager thinks about Photoshop. Inject yourself early in the creation pipeline. There's a content creation pipeline. You need to be early on to be part of the game. You need to make some investment early on, but it really pays out really later on. Because you're much earlier inside the whole game. You help them to create the vision. You go there and you can much better kind of get early on the feeling for the system. What's the performance on the hardware? In which direction we are going? Evolutionary prototyping. Your prototype becomes your product. This is QML. This is live. We are doing this nowadays live. It works. And clear separation between front end and back end. I'm a front end developer. My colleagues are back end developers. I know how a back end works, but I also know how a designer works. They have no clue how a designer works, the back end developers, but they know how QML works. And they do from time to time also QML coding. But they have a really good understanding how the OS works, which I don't have an understanding. So know your next layer. don't work on the next layer, but know the next layer. And prioritize communication. Early on in the project, one of the first things we're doing in a new project is, how do we communicate? How can we make a close cooperation, close communication? What are the communication channels? Developer, designers, getting close together. Something early on. And think about your customers. Qt is often only one of many user interfaces. They use technologies. So you can't really lock them in onto Qt. This is why when graphics designers start working on Qt, on QML code, it might be that in half a year they don't have really time to learn QML really in depth. In a half a year, 1 year, maybe they work on HTML5 user interfaces. So it's kind of a waste for them. They should stick to their tools. I'm really there for clear separation. They should know how we work, but they should not kind of start to get too much into this code. Yeah, and these are the references. You can see everything's online, and yeah. That's it. And something, make a photo.
Yes, the camera is pretty close.
And something, advertisement in my own thing. I'm the author of the QML book, if you haven't seen it yet, qmlbook.org. There are like 13 chapters about QML. I'm writing this together with Untitled. So if you want to know something about how the canvas works, or want to know something about particle simulation, you are free to go.
Can you put again the reference?
Yes. So the book is so much more exciting. Because there you can read the references also. Not yet, but soon.
2 in the morning today.
Okay. Questions? Yes, James S. Garnett. It was in the very early beginning. You can also buy his book. It's actually a really, really good book, nice to read. And you really should, think about this kind of layers he has created. Really helpful.
Is this book still available?
Yes. Yeah. And think also about that. This scope and strategy, at least for me as a front-end developer, is not I'm concerned about it. It's so easy just to fight with Nuno about graphics. Fight about, why is it placed there? Why is it there? It's not your topic. It's your topic about, can you make it easier for us to export it? Can you make it nicer? It's designer, it's his choices, what the form is, how it looks like. Your work is about QML. This complaining was. Yeah. Okay. Yeah.
Does QML Live work with QtDD?
I haven't checked it. I haven't yet get a hand on QtDD. Actually, we create just a QML scene and destroy it every time we create, besides some other things which we destroy. So as long as QtDD works with QML scene, yeah. So it's just a QML viewer. It should also work with WebGL, which is now also coming experimental in Qt 5.4. Hopefully. But we don't preserve state. For 3D object, you need to think about, you probably want to have more state preserving there. So you need to have some kind of UI around. So you get the source code of QML Live, so you can build your own QML Live. It would be interesting for you, which has more preserving state for the 3D scene, where the camera is and how far you're away and so on, and lights. Yep. Otherwise, I'm upstairs at the booth. Probably I have booth duty. Yeah, you can find me there. Cool. Thank you for listening.